It's 11:47 at night, and you are still awake, running numbers that don't add up to anything. Not money, not really. You are counting the small things. The email you answered after dinner, the extra 5 minutes you gave your kid before bed, even though your body was screaming for the couch. The comment you didn't make, the door you held, the version of yourself you chose to be today when a smaller, meaner version would have been so much easier. A checklist. That's what it becomes. And here is the strange part. Isn't it strange when you actually stop to look at it, that somewhere along the way, doing the right thing quietly turned into keeping score? You didn't decide to start counting. Nobody hands you the ledger on purpose. It just opens itself, page by page, every time you do something good and nobody claps. Think about the person in your life who is always the reliable one. Maybe that's you, the one who remembers the birthday, covers the shift, answers the 11 p.m. message because someone else is falling apart, and you are, apparently, always available to catch people. Notice that tightness in your chest right now, reading this. That's not imagination, that's recognition. What do you call it when doing good starts to feel like a debt someone owes you back? Here's the part nobody tells you. The ache you feel isn't really about being unappreciated. Not entirely. It's about the secret hope underneath the exhaustion. The hope that this time, someone will notice. This time, the effort gets seen. You do the thankless thing again, and some small, tired part of you waits by the door anyway, just in case. Have you ever done that? Given everything to a task, a job, a person, a season of your life, and quietly, privately, hope that this would be the time someone finally said, "I see what that cost you." Hold that thought. Because 2,000 years ago, a small group of exhausted men who had left their homes, their nets, their old lives, to follow a teacher through dust and heat and hostile crowds, turned to that teacher and asked him for one thing. Not comfort, not rest, not applause. They asked him to increase their faith. You would expect him to comfort them. You would expect him to tell them they'd done enough. What he told them instead was so much stranger than that, and so much more freeing than anything you've been taught to expect. Picture the scene he gives them in response. A servant has been out in the field all day. The sun has been merciless. His hands are raw from the plow, his sandals caked in dirt, his shoulders aching in that specific way that only comes from hours of repetitive, unglamorous labor. Somewhere nearby, sheep are calling out, restless, needing to be moved before dark. He has been out there since morning. He is hungry. He is tired in the way that settles into your bones. And now the sun is dropping, and he is walking home. You know this feeling. Maybe not the field, not the plow, but the walk home after a day that took everything out of you. The moment you open the door, hoping, just hoping, that something in the house will finally ask nothing more of you. Jesus asks his exhausted, faithful disciples a question. Which of you, he says, having a servant plowing or tending sheep, would say to him when he comes in from the field, "Come at once and sit down to eat"? You already know the answer. Of course not. The master doesn't rush to serve the servant a meal the moment he walks in. Instead, and this is the line that lands like cold water, the master says, "Prepare my meal, dress yourself properly, and serve me until I have eaten and drunk. After that, you may eat and drink." Plow the field, tend the sheep, serve the meal. Then, and only then, does the servant get to rest. Now watch what happens next, because this is where the parable stops being a story about farm labor and starts being a story about you. Jesus asks one more question. Does the master thank the servant? He says, because the servant did what he was told to do. And then he gives his disciples, the ones who just asked him to increase their faith, the answer they were not expecting. So you also, when you have done everything you were commanded to do, should say, "We are unworthy servants. We have only done what we were obligated to do. No applause, no grand gesture of gratitude, just the quiet, plain truth of having done what you were meant to do. This is not a story about being unpaid. This is not a story about being unloved. This is not a story about being unseen. This is a story about being finally, completely free of the debt you thought love was supposed to keep. Here is the part that changes everything if you let it. Unworthy servant sounds at first hearing like a harsh thing to say about yourself. It sounds like Jesus is telling his disciples they don't matter, that their exhaustion is meaningless, that no one is ever going to say thank you. Stay with me here, because that is not what this phrase means, not even close. The word Jesus uses isn't about worth in the way you're afraid of. It's about a specific kind of freedom, the freedom of a servant who was never keeping score in the first place. The master in this parable never asked the servant to plow the field so he could earn a reward afterward. The plowing was never a transaction. It was simply what the servant was made to do, in the role he had. And the moment you stop treating your good deeds like a transaction, something in your chest actually loosens. That's the whole secret hiding inside this hard little parable. The ache you felt earlier tonight, the one keeping you awake, running your invisible ledger of everything you did that nobody clocked. That ache isn't proof that you're unloved. It's proof that somewhere along the way, you started running a scoreboard that God never asked you to keep. Think back to that specific moment from earlier. The person doing the thankless task, quietly hoping someone would finally say something. Maybe that person is you, tonight. Here's the strange grace in this parable. The resolution was never supposed to be someone finally noticing. The resolution is putting the ledger down entirely. Not because what you did didn't matter, because it mattered enough to do without needing a receipt. Picture that scoreboard as an actual weight, something physical, something you have been carrying in your arms this whole time without realizing your arms were even full. And picture, just for a second, setting it down, not because you don't care about being seen, because you finally understand you were never carrying it for God. You were carrying it for yourself. This is not a story about earning a place at the table. This is not a story about proving your worth through exhaustion. This is not a story about becoming someone impressive enough to finally rest. This is a story about a peace that was never up for negotiation in the first place. So what does this actually look like this week? Not in theory, in your actual, tired, ordinary life. First, name one thing you did today expecting silent credit and consciously let the expectation go. Maybe it's the meal you cooked, the meeting you covered, the patience you showed someone who didn't deserve it. Say it out loud if you have to. I did this. I don't need anyone to know. Feel how different that sentence sits in your chest compared to the ledger version. Second, choose one act this week, done deliberately, with zero possibility of anyone ever finding out. Not a public kindness, a hidden one. Pay for something anonymously. Leave a task better than you found it and never mention it. Forgive someone in your heart and tell no one you did. This is how you retrain the part of you that has learned to perform for an audience. Third, when the old resentment creeps back in, and it will, because old habits don't die from one good week, replace the internal script. Instead of, I deserve recognition for this, borrow the servant's own words. I did what I was made to do. Let that phrase become something you can reach for in the exact moment your chest starts to tighten with that old, familiar, keeping score feeling. This is bigger than your evening exhaustion, though it starts there. It's bigger than the people in your life you've quietly resented for not noticing. This is about every person who has ever done the right thing in the dark and wondered if it counted. And underneath all of it is the most eternal truth in the whole parable. The God this story is pointing to was never running a ledger on you either. Every good thing he has ever done for you was never transactional. It was simply who he is. So here's the real question. Not what would change in your life if someone finally thanked you. What would change if you stopped waiting for them to? Because you were never an unworthy servant in the way you feared. You were free the entire time. You just hadn't put the ledger down yet. If something in this reached you tonight, tell me in the comments. What's one thankless thing you did today that no one will ever know about? Let's fill this comments section with the things we did in the dark, the ones that mattered anyway. You are not unseen. You were just never meant to be counting.